multiple stages of change. Some interventions particularly kind of focus on kind of trying to support these different stages. Whereas the sort of pre-contemplation, this is sort of, I don't even know this is a problem, I don't even know I have an intention yet. Then we have this contemplation stage where you're now aware of the problem. I now realize I should maybe be more physically active at my age, or I should try to spend more time in nature for kind of reducing stress. But at that stage, there's still ambivalence about attempting the change. There's then a preparation stage where there's awareness and a strong interest in changing. Then we might go into actions or active kind of involvement and addressing the problem. And it's quite important with this model and interventions that base their interventions on the model is this maintenance stage. So there's a kind of likelihood that you might relapse, you might have tried this new behavior, but what we need to focus in our interventions is also preventing that relapse. So we need to establish this behavior change in daily life. And kind of just sort of, again, thinking about, say, nature-based solutions or a green way, kind of any kind of research around saying that you can't just plug in a new setting, a new infrastructure. It needs to be well maintained. We need to listen to people. I lived in Cambridge for a while when new kind of cycle infrastructure was put in place. That was initially, citizens were concerned about kind of light pollution, so there was no lighting, and then people didn't really want to use it in the kind of more winter months, and people didn't feel so safe. And over time, infrastructure changed. They came up with new ways to bring in really good lighting, but that wouldn't create too much light pollution for other residents. So this kind of longer-term maintenance of that kind of space that's created can also help that kind of maintenance of behavior in these kind of more nature programs. So these are kind of very psychological models, but very much in the space of rational choice. We just need the right information and understand what would be better behavior or better environments for us, and we're kind of on board in the ways we're supported doing this. The third school of thought is and a kind of counter model is that of habit. Scholars in that area suggest, again, it's mainly psychologists that suggest that many behaviors in everyday life are actually subconscious. They're automated, we're not planning them. We might hold attitudes, we might have certain intentions, but really most things we do in everyday life just happen as a habit. And actually wouldn't be efficient as an individual if we planned every behavior rationally or consciously. It's just repeatedly daily performed in certain contexts. And the strength of a habit determines how difficult it is to change these habits. So something we've done over a long time, or is kind of created through kind of our family history or so, might be a really strong habit. But something that is maybe taken up relatively recently is the sort of habit that could maybe also change more easily. And the key in the sort of intervention world that use these frameworks is that they kind of look for points in people's lives where we see a general disruption in life routines. There might be things like moving house, a new job. It might be in an environment that would create a new neighborhood, a whole new neighborhood of new builds. Areas people move in, their life is disrupted, but also that kind of space is disrupted. So these could be really good points of habit breaking. And there are some great studies, particularly from colleagues in Australia, that kind of looked at people who were moving and how that might have helped. For example, changing people's kind of habits away from car driving towards more active travel. And sort of an extension to that, and that's very much my thing. I'm a psychologist, I'm a sociologist and anthropologist. A sort of sociological theory around that, and particularly Pierre Bourdieu, French sociologist, kind of took this idea of habit in his own direction. Sociologists don't tend to talk about behavior, they tend to talk about social practice or practice. But it's a very similar idea that we kind of develop what we are doing kind of socially. These are socially learned predispositions. What you would say we have certain tastes, the way we eat, the way we grow up. We might reject fast food, or we might see fast food as a perfectly good way to conveniently, provide calories for our family. All this is something we learn kind of culturally and socially. They're connected to social class very much in Perpigne's writing. There might be demographic markers. So social practices could be things that I learned from others and often through childhood. So things like nature collectiveness or value-based driving or cycling and the sort of things which is learn as we grow up. And might be the things we want to then teach our children. If we grew up cycling, we're keen that our children are also cycling and be able to walk to school. We might have been lucky to walk to school. We want our children to be able to walk to school. At least then that social practices are seen as, usually we undertake them with others. So the social aspect is really important in this sort of framing. So usually we don't do things, often we don't do things on our own. We might go to the park, family activity. We might not just go to work, but get our children to school first, then we go to work. And also these are sort of bundles of practices, sociologists we call them. So often we combine lots of things. So behaviours aren't isolated things. We commute to work, we drop children, we buy groceries on the way home. These are all things we might be doing at one. Or if I world of food, we don't just kind of nourish ourselves. We kind of spend time with family. We might teach children manners as we're eating at the same table. We might socialize. There might be lots of different sort of behaviors hidden behind something like a family meal. And very briefly, one of my own studies that used this kind of framing was around commuting decisions. This was in the UK, a study to see how travel behavior embedded in commuters' social contexts. And this was in Cambridge, which is unusual for the UK, quite a cycling city. Many of the women I interviewed were women with small children, and they were, in terms of our kind of quantitative survey of this larger project, daily car drivers, kind of mainly car commuters, car drivers. But many of them talked about how kind of at heart they're cyclists, how they were previously cyclists, but their choices and decisions are very shaped by the changing social world. So someone who needs to drop their son off before their work needs to drive now, just where the nursery is located on the kind of work. Someone else says they're a carer, so they have quite a complicated pattern to be able to go to work and care for this relative. They're using a car. Both of these were kind of sort of strong stories of the attitude was we completely value cycling and we don't like driving. Their social norm was someone like me, kind of an academic in a Cambridge setting, should be cycling. I feel that I'm telling you I'm driving every day. They have all the intention to go back to cycling when they would have the opportunity to do that. It doesn't fit within the mold, I guess, of some of these behavioral theories that sort of suggest that you just need to change people's attitudes and it goes a long way to change behavior. And then a final theory I want to introduce is nut theory. Again, I think at least maybe public health people on the call might be quite familiar with that. This comes from behavioral economics, so yet another discipline that is interested in theories of behavior change. And nut theory is very similar to the idea of habit, to say actually people rarely act rationally. So we all know what we should eat, but we still choose to eat unhealthily. And choices are just too complex and complicated. So choices are either sort of postponed, we don't, we know what we should be doing, but we don't have the time to think about it. Or it's just there's kind of too much going on in our life. And nudge theory says that actually we can't just nudge people and behaving sensibly. So a kind of example for this is if a school cafeteria, say, just offers good diets or the kind of healthy stuff is is, and the beginning of the cure is the cheaper kind of food that might nudge people to make better decisions. And I'm guessing there's some nature-based solutions as well. Someone would say a really high quality, a well-maintained greenway can really persuade people to not to drive and to use that greenway. We can nudge people into checking out kind of a new exciting space that might have a promise of change, and that's not a kind of rational decision because we're nudging them towards that lovely new space in their neighborhood. And like a typical example is, I won't say that now, but there are kind of different ways to talk about nudge theory. This is an example from, I think it's Sweden, where he kind of developed this. This was a staircase next to an escalator, and they kind of changed the staircase to kind of a piano that actually, when you stepped on it, you would hear the kind of piano notes going up, and I'm sure just how many people would automatically kind of try out that specific stairs. Sort of the idea behind that. And I guess maybe people reflecting overall on these different theories and say the maintenance theory, there's one question, is this sort of fun as the habit breaker and something fun that happens on your boring way to commute? I don't know, if 2 weeks on people are still using the fun stairs, or if they're back on the escalator scrolling through the phone. So yeah. And then finally, a final model you might hear, and actually WHO is using that model quite a lot in kind of their behavioural insights work, is the COMBI model. It's sort of a nice combination of quite a lot of the different assumptions that are introduced, so the psychology, the sociology, the economics, the sort of individual, but also the social kind of side of things. So it includes C of COMBI is capability, so own individual, mental, physical capability, the knowledge you have, the skills, maybe the resilience you have, including maybe on fitness. Then opportunity is very much looking at the context. So what are the sociocultural opportunities? People like me also cycle. And the physical opportunities. So yes, there is now a really nice greenway in my neighborhood. I could actually walk my children to school in a really safe way. And then there is motivation that's more than conscious, but also unconscious motivation, the attitudes, the intentions. Might be kind of more emotions and impulses behind that, and that kind of feeds into how it might affect behavior and so on. This is a summary of this part. So there are numerous, sometimes conflicting models. All of them in a way show that behavior change can be quite difficult. Our brains are wired to preserve behaviors that have been learned. And I think for me as a social scientist, it's very important to remember that behaviors are not just individual. So it's about family members, others in our social environment. They're really powerful forces to think about. And obviously opportunities provided by the environment are essential, but they're not sufficient. So I'm just pausing here if there are any questions.
Conny, there's one in the Q&A.
Yeah.
I thought if I click it, it shows for everyone, but it doesn't. Should I put it in the chat?